you ever considered how knowledge and power intertwine in the tapestry of history? Imagine, if you will, a time when the power of knowledge challenged the might of authority. Our tale begins with Nudar ibn al-Harith, a man of intellect and curiosity from the Quraysh tribe in ancient Arabia. Nudar was not one to be confined by the boundaries of his homeland. He ventured far and wide, from the grandeur of Rome to the mystique of Persia, absorbing their myths, histories, and philosophies. His mind became a treasure trove of knowledge, a library of tales from distant lands. Now, back in Mecca, a man named Muhammad claimed to be a prophet. He spun tales of divine revelations, many of which echoed the myths and histories that Nudar had learned during his travels. Yet, Muhammad presented these tales not as stories from other cultures, but as divine truths revealed to him alone. This didn't sit well with Nudar. He saw a man using the stories he knew so well, stories from Rome, Persia, and beyond for personal and political gain. So, Nudar challenged Muhammad. He questioned his prophetic claims using his knowledge to expose the true origins of these tales. It was an intellectual clash of titans, a battle of knowledge against power. But power, as it often does, fought back. After the Battle of Badr, Nudar was captured. Despite his intellect, despite his knowledge, he was in the hands of those who sought to silence him. Muhammad, the man he had challenged, now held his fate. And so, Nudar met his end. He was executed, a casualty of his intellectual defiance. But his story didn't end there. Before his death, 15 days were enough for Muhammad to contact those who could help him in this ordeal. Finally, Muhammad appeared with verses containing his answers to the questions, justifying his delay with a naive and ridiculous excuse. He did not say, "Insha'Allah, God willing," when he promised the Meccans a response the next day. And do not say of anything, "I will do that tomorrow." Course of history? This is the intriguing tale of Nudar ibn al-Harith and Muhammad, an encounter that was far more than just a mere exchange of words. Then we come to the awaited answers after a long absence. Look at the verse he claims his God sent him about the people of the cave. They will say, 3, the fourth of them being their dog, and they will say, 5, the sixth of them being their dog, guessing at the unseen, and they will say, 7, and the eighth of them is their dog. Say, "My Lord is best aware of their number, none knows them but a few." So do not argue about them except with an obvious argument, and do not inquire about them among the speculators from anyone. Muhammad, caught off guard, promised to respond the next day, but failed to do so. 15 days later he returned with his answers, attributing his delay to a simple oversight. He had forgotten to say, "Insha'Allah," or "God willing." Muhammad's God is confused, unable to determine the correct number, which is the essence of the test. And it's funny that he tells Muhammad in the same verse, say, "My Lord knows best their number." Well, if he knows their number, why doesn't he tell you directly without beating around the bush? Maybe 3 or 5 or 7? This means that Muhammad, after 15 days, did not come with a decisive answer, and those who helped him with the answer provided him with confused information that does not quench the thirst. Fortunately for Muhammad, he died without knowing that the story of the people of the cave is a fictional story in the first place. Therefore, the Orientalist excluded that these questions were prepared by the Jews, as the story of the 7 sleepers is not mentioned in the New Testament nor the Old Testament. Aristotle mentioned it in his book, Physics Part 4, saying that this myth was widely spread among the pagan Greeks. Researcher John Coke John says that the Indians have the same myth, and so do the pagan Chinese. It had spread across Europe as an educational and moral story, and from there it came to the Near East with traders and others. The fact that the Quran considered the people of the cave and their story to be real, and did not indicate that it is a mythical story, is something to be ridiculed. How can Muhammad's God narrate in his divine book a fictional story as a historical fact from the stories of the previous nations? We come to Muhammad's answer to the second question, about the man who traveled to the east and the west of the earth. The answer was more vague and weak than the first. And they ask you about Dhul-Qarnayn, say, "I will recite to you about him a report." Here, Muhammad also failed to come up with the real name of the owner of the Dhul-Qarnayn myth, and made his companions, biographers, and Quran commentators utterly confused. Ibn Ishaq said, Dhul-Qarnayn was a man from Egypt, named Marzuban bin Marzaba the Greek, from the descendants of Yonan bin Japheth bin Noah. Ibn Hisham said, his name was Alexander and he was the one who built Alexandria, named after him. Ibn Hisham in his biography said that when Ali bin Abi Talib was asked about who Dhul-Qarnayn was, he said, he was a righteous servant of God. He called his people to God, so they hit him on his horn and he died. Then God revived him and he called his people to God, so they hit him on his horn and he died. So he was called Dhul Qarnayn. In Al-Makrizi's Al-Kitat, it is mentioned that Dhul Qarnayn is Al-Sab bin Di Marid bin Al-Harith Al-Ra'ish bin Al-Hamal Di Sad bin Ad-Diman bin Aral-Maltat bin Saksak bin Wail bin Himyar bin Saba bin Yashjub bin Yarub bin Katan bin Hud, peace be upon him, bin Eber bin Salah bin Arphaxad bin Sam bin Noah, peace be upon him, and that he was a king of the kings of Himyar, the kings of Yemen, and they are the Arabs. In all this confusion, proof that Muhammad's verse did not bring any significant benefit and failed to answer the question posed to him, and even the closest people to Muhammad, like Ali bin Abi Talib, failed to tell his questioner who Dhul Qarnayn was, and spouted nonsense that makes no sense. As for the third question, what is the soul? Muhammad's God evaded it by saying, "Say, the soul is of the affair of my Lord." Isn't Muhammad the one who claimed that his God said, "Say, if the sea were ink for writing the words of my Lord, the sea would be exhausted before the words of my Lord were exhausted, even if we brought the like of it as a supplement." So how did this God, despite his inexhaustible words, fail to define the soul to people in a few words? Whoa, it's astonishing. Thus, Muhammad's failure in the test was resounding. After 15 days of absence, contrary to his promise, he came to the Quraysh with weak answers, failing to give the real number of the people of the cave, failing to identify the character of Dhul Qarnayn and the nature of the soul. Were these answers, which left his companions and followers in confusion and turmoil, able to convince the Quraysh, especially Nudar ibn al-Harith, the widely read intellectual of his time? Therefore the Meccans became more convinced of Muhammad's lies and his claim to prophethood and the connection of revelation to him, and they remained confident that he was bewitched or insane. It was natural for him to flee to Yathrib, Medina, as a result of his failure, and there he turned into a highwayman, living off raids, looting, plunder and captivity, imposing his religion by placing the sword on people's necks. Perhaps we do not need to cite evidence of the falsification that fills the history books. The story takes a grim turn with the capture and execution of Nudar ibn al-Harith. We reach the last chapter of the life of the wise Nudar ibn al-Harith, who baffled Muhammad with knowledge. So he hated him after Nudar was the reason for exposing his claim to prophethood and shook his confidence in the authors of the Quran. So he migrated to Yathrib, where the enmity with the Meccans was due to their trade wealth and good reputation. Yathrib was inhabited by conflicting factions of the Aus and the Khazraj, who saw in Muhammad the best to avenge them from the Meccans. Events accelerated, and Muhammad raided a Quraysh caravan in what they called the Battle of Badr, looting it with his newly formed gang, and capturing Nudar while he was returning from his trip from Sham and Al-Hira. Muhammad and his followers accepted ransom for the prisoners, except for Nudar, and his companion Nudar stood tall and refused to humble himself before Muhammad's gang, for he was the one who debated him with knowledge and defeated him. If Nudar had wanted to kill Muhammad, he could have done so in Mecca, but the ethics of the Meccans were civilized, as they abhorred killing and plunder and turned to knowledge, literature and trade. But let's not forget that Muhammad, raised in the wilderness, carried with him the inclination to captivity and thievery. Nudar, like others in the caravan, was not a combatant, and the ethics of the Arabs at that time did not allow killing non-combatants. But Muhammad asked Ali to kill Nudar, and Nudar was killed standing tall like a mountain. Muhammad did not stop at erasing Nudar's cultural traces, but also spread rumors that Nudar's son Nudar converted to Islam and migrated with Muhammad. But how could he migrate when his father knew Muhammad's lies? So it's certain that this story is fabricated to prove the correctness of Islam. Since then, Muhammad banned poetry, arts and science so that the minds of his followers would remain closed, and he succeeded in that none of Muhammad's companions were scholars, poets or even professionals, but he gathered around him killers and opportunists.